So a few days ago, I found this cute little jar in my room and I decided to make a little house inside of it. I started with pressing the jar into some foam in order to get the basic shape of the jar, and then I traced it with a permanent marker, then cut it out with a craft blade. I had some really clean snaps here, and I thought they were nice and satisfying. After fitting the foam in the jar, I reshaped it, cut the foam more and more until it fit perfectly. Uh, Again, after struggling to fit the foam out of the jar, which took an entire minute, I sanded it down a little. Make the foam fit correctly, I scored the height that I wanted the base to sit at in the jar, and once it was scored, I cut and sanded it down. In order to get the glue and foam to sit with the plastic well, I needed to sand down the lid using this here sandpaper. Once the jar was sanded, I glued the foam to the lid, which was a struggle. Once the base was the right size, it was time for the bits box. All I needed from these two boxes were these little fairy lights, which I got from my sister. I then proceeded to remove all of my hard work gluing the base to the lid in order to make the hole for the lights. We first need to make our little house. Using a cereal box and a permanent marker, I traced the first line, then decided the walls of the house should be straight, and I got a ruler. Now that I think about it, a crooked house would look cool in Mini, so comment down below if you would like to see that. And I decided to shorten the walls because I thought it would look at a better scale, and once the two bigger walls were done, I traced and cut out these smaller side walls. After the walls were all cut out, I taped them together to get the general size, which I liked. I proceeded to cut out the windows of the front wall using a plastic water bottle, and in order to create the window glass. I also sanded said plastic bottle down so the glue would stick better and for the windows to have a nice and opaque look. Finally, for the walls, I taped down the windowed wall to my desk and let it sit for the next 2 hours. While that was drying, I glued the other walls together, and once again, hello, it is Editor Huck here. Unfortunately, as I was recording and building this, my camera overheated, and so it was not recording so it could cool off. And of course, I don't have the ability to go back and redo all of the work I did to reshoot it, so unfortunately the clips from as I was making the chimney for this build, and to the point where I had to go get batteries so I could test my circuit, I was not recording. So as I just said, I built the chimney and I cut out the hole for the little LED box. I do show the progress, and so that's why there's this big old cut here. My apologies. Once again, my apologies for the lack of certain clips. Here is the progress that was made. I built a roof and a chimney and cut the hole out for the LEDs in the base. Once I had my hole in the base cut out, I needed to use my drill to make a hole in the lid for the switch. Another thing I didn't want to end up showing the camera, or more like I forgot, was the LEDs have this little lip next to the switch, and I wanted it gone, so I decided to get out my rotary tool. Editor's note, I would like to remind you that when using an item such as a rotary tool, saw, or drill, always wear eye protection and gloves. Unfortunately, I could not find my gloves for the life of me during this project, but I of course found them as soon as I finished it. I was still very careful as I am fond of my fingers. Please be safe. After putting my eye protection on, I used the rotary tool very carefully to cut the little lip off. Uh, I made some supports out of foam, which then glued to the LED base. Uh, For now, it was fine. I then glued the LEDs to the lid, and before I could finally touch the base, I had to put the battery cap on. Then I finally added it to the base. I looked into adding trees to this space, however, the model trees I had on hand were too big. I did, however, decide to use some armature wire to make some smoke for the house, using the wire to make the shape of it. I liked this idea because it gave the house some movement, which gave more life to this. I set the house aside and spread some glue on the base. Due to lack of any flocking, I had to use sugar to make the snow. Uh, then I primed the base. At like 11 p.m., the window was now dry and I glued it to the house. I tested to see how the LEDs would look in the house. And I thought they looked good, so I primed the house. Then time to make this smoke, which I did by wrapping some polyfill around the wire to mimic smoke pouring from the chimney. I sealed the polyfill with some glue spray, and finally, I glued some sugar to the roof to make the snow on said roof, and then it was onto the painting. My sister also gave me some rock painting paints, so I decided to paint the base coat of the house with this. But the hardest challenge of the project wasn't painting or building anything, it was opening this paint. Just play the clip. I'd use my mixing tool to open it. The little foil on top didn't have a little lip to help open it like most foil things do, so I had to stab it repeatedly until it worked. I dabbed the red paint onto the house using a sponge brush in order to avoid brush strokes, as that doesn't look good. And I made a nice gray color paint out of white and black paints to paint the chimney. I did a little more black to the gray to make it darker, then immediately ignored it and made a white wash for the base. Once the base was painted, I painted the cement that is in between the bricks. Looking back, you wouldn't see this as well at this scale, but whatever, who cares. Finally, I glued the house with all of the lights inside, and with that, I was finally finished. Hello everybody, once again it is Editor Huck. Before I show y'all the Glamour Shots, I want to go over what I learned from this build. Find my gloves before the build. Again, like I said earlier, always be safe with your hands. Fingers are useful. But looking back, I wish I had let the paint dry. I was very impatient with it, and because of that, the snow paint looks very asphalty and doesn't look as good as I would have liked. So, and my keen eye viewers would have noticed towards the earlier bits before I painted or primed anything, I did try to make a little trail. I didn't really feature it because you can't see it at all in the finished shots. But again, I really wish I had been more patient with the painting, and I think it would have looked a lot better if I had. And you will notice in the final shots that the lights are peeking out from the sides. No matter how hard I tried, I could not paint the hot glue, and that is something I'm going to try and work on later on. So, on to the glamour shots.